Everyday Samurai, Episode 11. Greetings, friends, and welcome to Everyday Samurai, in service to your liberty and the security of a free state. How's it going, everyone? Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us on the path of building a world that works for everyone, where respect for the divine individual is maintained by enlightened warriors dedicated to protecting life, liberty, and property. If you've been enjoying this content, please consider sharing the show with a friend, someone that resonates with the message of building a free society through the practice of samurai-related martial arts. Another thing you can do to help us is give us a positive review on iTunes or the podcatcher of your choice, and, if you feel so moved, post this episode on social media. Like, subscribe, and share, as the cool kids like to say. For this session, I'm rolling solo, as I'm doing a bit of traveling. I've just recently attended the annual Property and Freedom Society meeting in Bodrum, Turkey. As the name implies, the PFS is dedicated to radical intellectual scholarship based on the works of Professor Hans Hoppe, who is the foremost proponent of a private property-based social order. When you understand that private property is the only logically consistent way of understanding justice and applying a universal standard to everyone at all times, you can know when to ethically apply martial skills. In other words, a private property legal and social order is the best way of knowing when the use of force is justified. Without such an ethical system, all talk of martial techniques or tactics is baseless and dangerous even. Most people, particularly in the United States, are familiar with the opening lines from the Declaration of Independence, where the pursuit of happiness is substituted for property. This innovation on the part of Thomas Jefferson and the Committee of Five that drafted the Declaration skirted around the contradictory nature of a tax-funded property-protecting agency. The Declaration at least acknowledged that the whole purpose of government is to act as a security agent instituted among men, or in other words, its constituent members, for but one sole purpose, that is, to secure individual rights. People talk about all kinds of rights nowadays, whether it be the right to health care, reproductive rights, human rights, civil rights, to clean water, affordable housing, a living wage, or any other fancy term bandied about in common discourse. Most of these are a bunch of blustering nonsense aimed at distracting the average listener, while politicians use such pseudo-rights as justification for stealing more from the average taxpayer. It's only through the sound economic reasoning of the Austrian school, of which Professor Hoppe is a part, that we can cut through the distractions with logically consistent, razor-sharp analysis. As someone that went into the military as soon as I was legally able, out of a deep sense of flag-waving patriotism, and later got into law enforcement specifically to fight the war on drugs, the abrupt yet undeniable truth of Austrian political economy using individual subjectivity as the point of analysis was quite an eye-opener. Only through understanding the science of human action and its causal realist subjective individualism approach could I dispense with the illusion of collectivism. I could no longer deny that only individuals act, and that society was but a euphemism or a figure of speech that glosses over a collection of individuals, each with their own preferences, characteristics, aspirations, and values. I could no longer believe in enforcing legislation aimed at imposing some nonsensical will of the people when it contradicted respect for the individual. I began to see that most legislation acts contrary to upholding law because law is very simple and clear when viewed through the lens of property rights. Rather than being ephemeral, ambiguous, and subject to corruption like every other kind of rights talked about in political discourse today, only property rights have clearly discernible borders to signify when an actual violation has occurred. While determining the facts of a case may be complex, the property rights standard remains unambiguous, clear, and clearly just. As a warrior who has dedicated a lifetime to the cause of protecting others, I began to see that most of what I had been engaged in at the hands of the state was contrary to the cause of justice. Such is the distorting nature of politics. Coming to this realization was not instantaneous. In fact, it happened over a period of about a year, with many applications taken in layers. Yet, reading the works of Ludwig von Mises, and in particular his book on bureaucracy, along with The production of Security by Gustave de Molinari contributed greatly to my Road to Damascus moment, where the scales fell from my eyes and I could finally see that the only way that justice could be orchestrated properly is if people were free to choose their security providers. This is precisely what the American Republic was designed to be, a codified mechanism of self-government, where we the people work together for mutual security. You can see this in the prominent reliance on the militia of the several states to execute the laws, repel invasions, and suppress insurrections. The American Republic was also designed to not establish a permanent security bureaucracy. A standing army and the power to declare war was specifically denied to the central authority, and most specifically the office of the executive. Despite having the best of intentions, the United States federal system was quickly corrupted by the politically ambitious. Self-government based on mutual security and individual liberty was soon displaced in favor of schemers that could use the institutions of government for their own selfish ends. The notion of equal justice under the law gets twisted by what Anthony DeJasse calls churning, or the political process as it unfolds over a series of iterations. Early politicians and statesmen like John C. Calhoun also recognized the process of power expanding and creating different classes based on the contradictory nature of taxation. That's right, taxation creates class struggle because there are always those that benefit more by receiving a larger share of the take than those that receive less. There are those that have more taken from them than any benefits they derive from government quote-unquote services. Those that get more benefits, whether it be material or psychological, will always be incentivized to call for more government power and more resources under the control of government authority. While people have been writing about these things since the early 1800s, it was quite a shock to me when the tools of political economic analysis clicked into my awareness. I certainly did not get these lessons in any of my social studies classes in high school. As I was immersed in the world of international security affairs at a very high bureaucratic level, I got to see how every so-called problem addressed by government is always accompanied by a call for more resources and authorities with which to address them. Remember this every time you come across a political actor raising an issue. You will always find them agitating to get control of more resources, more finances, manpower, or authority with which to impose their desires upon others. They will dress up the issue as being related to security, because security is the sole purpose for constituting government. But it will always have to create an elaborate scheme to skew the definition of justice, and security for that matter. This is how we get such nonsensical terms like wars on drugs, terror, poverty, women, or some other cause célèbre, disaffected group, whatever the issue of the day might be. For this, it's important to remember Chapter 1 of Sun Tzu's The Art of War. All war is based on deception. And as von Clausewitz so clearly stated in his On War, or Vom Krieg in the original German, war is politics by other means. Politics and war are functional equivalents. Therefore, all politics is based on deception. So it is natural that politics be rife with lies and false testimony. Government activity, of which the sole function or reason for being is the orchestration of justice, inevitably becomes distorted by political processes. We should come to expect it and become adept at seeing through the deceit. Entire industries accompany the weaving of a tapestry of illusion to create a facade legitimizing unlawful government activity. Think tanks, bureaucracies, international and civic organizations, educational institutions, and media outlets have replaced the high priests and oracles engaged in making grand pronouncements of the divine right to rule. They generate reports, hold conferences, sponsor academics, perform ceremonies, and engage in great pageantry to convince the public that politicians and bureaucrats are working selflessly and necessarily in the interests of the, quote, greater good. Cutting through the delusion requires consistent analytical standards, just like surviving interpersonal combat requires adhering to undeniable principles. In samurai-related martial arts, based on edged weapons combat, the principle is to not contest for space with a force vector. That is, we recognize the human body, no matter how strong or armored it might be, is no match for the blade, bullet, or blunt instrument. Therefore, we learn to shape our bodies in relation to a threat, maneuver to a tactically superior and unassailable position, to strike in a manner that the enemy cannot avoid. In samurai martial systems, we study angles to understand combat geometry, and geometry has axiomatic formulas, such as the Pythagorean theorem, that can inform our understanding of the real world without necessarily going out to measure or test things. We can use geometry to expand understanding simply by using our minds, and later use these insights in a practical manner. In the realm of political economy, principles are based on the a priori truth of human action. A priori is just a term that means a fact of existence embedded in the bedrock of reality. They are axiomatic statements taken to be true prior to testing or empirical verification. Of course, you could test or verify these things, but by doing so, you have not added anything to the body of knowledge, just like how using the Pythagorean theorem to calculate the measurements of a triangle while in a classroom does not require you to go out and verify it by measuring some pyramid-shaped buildings. The action axiom implies that only individuals act, and they act in order to transform their present condition to one of greater satisfaction. Human action always takes place in the manifest realm of time, space, and form. Political economy is a separate discipline from metaphysics or theology. It involves the use of finite resources found in the material world, applied with the belief that an action will achieve a desired end. Human beings must use resources to sustain themselves physically. To use resources, individuals must have physical control of them and be free from interference by others. Property rights are the social convention that gives an individual, working individually or in concert with others, exclusive control over a given resource. In other words, property rights are a necessary precondition to sustain or improve human life and prevent interpersonal conflict. Perhaps now you can see that understanding the principles of political economy is essential for every warrior, protector, or justice seeker. Before you can skillfully apply warrior arts, you must know when and why you are using them. To be on the side of justice requires understanding its nature. With this in mind, I'm going to now read some parts of a paper I wrote on the nature of law and the state. I talk about how justice becomes perverted and what can be done to implement a private property-based law enforcement order. But first, let me remind you of the importance of maintaining your physical flexibility and overall well-being by regularly wringing the stress out of your body. That's right, I'm talking about a yoga-based fitness program, which I now call an essential part of every warrior's training regimen. But let's face it, traditional yoga can be boring and tedious. Long sessions and difficult positions turn most people off. Me too, up until recently, because you can get all the benefits of yoga with a fun, non-traditional approach. Progressive yoga restores resting length to tight muscles and connective tissue perfectly for people who need a no-nonsense, time-efficient, comprehensive, and practical method of resetting the body. So check out everydaysamurai.life/progress right now. These are great sessions. You'll feel good and see results in just 20 minutes. Everyone has that kind of time. So check it out today at everydaysamurai.life/progress. Okay, on to the nature of law and governance. Human beings have certain biological imperatives that must be satisfied in order to survive. Each individual must satisfy these needs continually over time using finite means found within the material world. Rules are necessary to avoid conflicts that may occur with others over control of a given resource. Property rights are a social convention that allow humans exclusive space to occupy and resources to consume, so as to mollify disputes. John Locke, writing in 1689 in his Second Treatise of Government, recognized the inviolability of individuals as well as the actions they take toward transforming their environment into usable goods as, quote, interests of property, close quote. The mixing of labor invests ownership over the materials transformed through original appropriation, such that individuals may use or dispose of their property as they choose. Deciding what to do with one's own property is an exercise of exclusive control inherent to property rights. Individuals within a society also exchange their justly held property with others through trade or gift. For this reason, the French economist Antoine de Tracy, writing in 1817, came to regard society as a succession of exchanges defined whereby both parties always gain, resulting in continual small advantages. As such, de Tracy added that the object of society is, quote, solely the fulfillment, close quote, of individuals executing their will toward the enjoyment of these advantages. Law, as Friedrich Bastiat recognized in 1850, is the collective organization of the individual right to defense of personality, liberty, and property. Law upholds justice, identified as just conduct among human relations, as they engage in the continual succession of property exchanges that form a society. John Locke also held property rights as central to human flourishing and the chief end of civil society. Indeed, as American economist of the Austrian tradition Murray Rothbard demonstrated, only law based on individual property rights can be universally applied to all human activity, and is thus the only system that can consistently uphold justice. Examining facts pertinent to specific ownership disputes or property violation claims is the function of law. Competing claims to a property title or conflicts over a resource inevitably arise, and adjudication is required to restore social harmony. Historically, customary law evolved organically as something to be described or to be discovered, not something to be enacted, as Bruno Leoni wrote. The law, therefore, is a discovery of fact regarding the true holder of a property title, and if any violation of that title has occurred, so as to compensate the aggrieved. In this way, property-based law offers a true and unfailing recipe to restore justice. These discoveries can then be used to inform future modes of social function. John Hasnas, in his 2008 article on the depoliticization of law, illustrates how continued iterations of dispute settlement transforms interactional expectancies into recognized rules of behavior, so as to evolve into enforceable practices. This is the logical and legitimate use of legal precedents. It makes justice more expedient and swift. Forming mechanisms to secure and enforce these best practices of human interaction has traditionally been the purpose of government. Locke, again, describes the formation of government as arising from the social nature of humans, where people enjoy, quote, peaceable living, security of their properties, and a supposedly neutral arbiter to settle disputes. Yet the establishment of a fixed arbiter carries with it the seeds of injustice. For, as German philosopher Wilhelm von Humboldt noted in his 1792 book on the sphere and duties of government, quote, hurtful consequences, close quote, follow when a political organization becomes a proprietor with influence to its own interests of property. In this way, the organization established to protect people and their property undergoes what Bastiat called the conversion of the law into an instrument of plunder. Anthony de Jassy revealed that all governmental bodies must schematically maximize the resources and decision-making power at their discretion in order to maintain their position as a, quote, plenipotentiary agent, close quote. Decision-making authority over another's property must constantly expand as governments are compelled to secure their tenure through redistribution. That is, they have to make some people better off, and in so doing, they have to make other people worse off. The natural tendency is for government to gain ground on the lives and properties of their constituents, as Thomas Jefferson noted in a 1788 letter to Edward Carrington. It is this continued expansion of governmental authority that leads to the modern state, as defined by Max Weber. States, according to Weber, have a territorial monopoly on the use of force, coupled with the power of confiscatory taxation in order to support their operations. It is also this monopoly status that signifies the, quote, root of all evil in the perversion of justice, as Hans Hoppe has written. As these legal decisions are then altered to the advantage of the monopolist and at the expense of others. Inherent to a private property-based system of law whereby people exchange with others for their mutual benefit is the choice of security and justice provider. Similar to Locke's description for the need for establishing a known authority to overcome the inconveniences of being a judge in one's own case, most people are inclined to take advantage of the division of labor and rely, in addition to self-defense, also on specialized protectors. Joseph Stromberg, writing on the defense of free societies, posits that security provisions within a property-based society would entail a, quote, rough combination of citizen-based militia and insurance or subscription-based services to supplement their own security initiatives. Forming security alliances within and among communities are an organic means of organizing defense with strong historical precedent. An account of Switzerland from 1714 noted the various localities enjoying peace and security through the, quote, mutual assistance agreements, close quote, that field a well-regulated militia that may overturn a government at pleasure. Granville Sharp, the British slave abolitionist, regarded a citizens' militia as the, quote, only safe means of defending a free people, close quote. Italian Republican theorist Niccolò Machiavelli, perhaps the first advocate of realpolitik, also advocated citizen-based security as prerequisite to upholding law, noting in his 1527 discourses that, quote, a good militia is the foundation of all states, and that where that is wanting, there can be neither good laws nor aught else that is good, close quote. Constitutional attorney Edwin Vieira exhaustively details the colonial and constitutional militia tradition in the United States as the primary mechanism to, quote, execute the laws, repel invasions, and suppress insurrections, so as to maintain the security of a free state. He goes on to characterize a free state as one of popular self-government, and the militia as providing a formal forum in which public matters can be addressed. It is for these reasons Vieira highlights that the only institution or office described as necessary within the United States Constitution is the militia of the several states. Vieira also lays out how local, citizen-based militia companies could also provide modern law enforcement functions by having select members perform advanced policing services, such as forensic evidence collection and analysis, investigations, and other tasks that require extensive training. This aligns with the vision of Thomas Jefferson, who advocated political units of such size that every citizen can attend. Jefferson also envisioned that each ward or administrative units of a size no larger than which all people could know and personally engage with each other would have, quote, those portions of self-government for which they are best qualified by confiding in them police, administration of justice, and exercises of militia. In short, to have them made little republics. Yet, inconveniences also arise under this construct, as even the smallest of government, when enjoying monopoly status, has an inherent tendency towards centralization of power, authority, and command of resources. Even Vieira reinforces this error by considering local polities as mere creatures of their states, exercising only such limited governmental powers as the state constitutions and laws delegate to them. The prevailing use of this so-called Dillon's rule for exercising grants of authority considers local municipalities as exercising only powers granted to them by state legislatures. Even when writers find that municipalities have due process standing in cases involving their liberty or property, localities are still considered in light of their creating state. This legal interpretation of larger political units creating local protective affiliations is fundamentally at odds with the construction of how humans progressively integrate from the state of nature into families, villages, tribes, cities, and nations in order to enjoy the benefits of society. Mises' analysis reveals that cooperation, society, and civilization result logically from the benefits each individual mutually derives through the division of labor with fellow humans. This leads back to Locke with the reminder that the, quote, chief end, close quote, of civil society is the preservation of property. By amalgamating organic security alliances into top-down hierarchies with the power to dictate over constituents and their resources, the intended purpose of securing persons and their property is lost. For this reason, Rothbard noted how the United States Constitution as a legal construct had failed abysmally at restricting government to its proper sphere. Further, Hoppe holds the arrangement as incompatible with the very doctrine of human rights because it allows one's alleged protector ultimate decision-making regarding one's own person and property. So what's required? Well, in order to evolve beyond the errors of past security structures, law must evolve beyond monopoly auspices and the aegis of rigid hierarchies. Progress requires, as Gustave de Molinari wrote in 1849, that it be replaced by free production, This free production involves individual choices among providers and consumers wherein, quote, anyone could buy from, sell to, or otherwise contract with anyone else concerning protective and judicial services, and one could at any time unilaterally discontinue any such cooperation with others and fall back on self-reliant defense or change one's protective affiliations. And that comes from Hans Hermann Hoppe. Protective affiliations are a natural feature of society that draw from the benefits of task specialization and economic integration. While the variations in individually assumed risk, citizen-based alliances, local and regionally affiliated militia, or professional security firms is impossible to predict, the characteristic feature of this legal structure is elective choice, the preclusion of monopoly privileges, and the fulfillment of self-determination. To maintain voluntary protective associations, David Friedman, in his Machinery of Freedom, describes how the resources and enthusiasm put toward paintball, airsoft, and other mock combat games already existing within society could be harnessed toward organic security services. For instance, in 2013, a survey of just one practical shooting association in the United States revealed that its members spend on average $1,580 just on personal equipment and participate in more than 6 events per year. With so many people already willing to buy defensive accoutrements and expend their time training in a full gamut of martial skills, the field is ripe for cultivating resilient populations for militia-type service. This also resonates with the idea put forth by Mary Ruwart, author of the fantastic book Healing Our World, whereby fielding teams of local and private security associations for a widespread militia Olympics would attract sponsorship in the same way as other competitive sporting events do today. Further, such organizations and training venues foster a sense of community while also offering a healthy outlet for competitive spirits in the quest for prestige. These modern concepts realize Machiavelli's Republican ideal of how, quote, training for war ought to be employed in times of peace as an exercise, and in times of war as necessity and for glory, close quote. Both Friedman and Ruwart envision much of the equipment outlays as being the responsibility of individuals, as a sort of membership dues, while charitable donors may provide for those unable to pay for themselves. Individuals could also receive something akin to a grant or fellowship in similar fashion to contemporary scholars and athletes. Vieira's research into the legacy of American colonial militia bears this out in the historical record. For instance, the ordinances of Rhode Island, beginning in the 1630s, presumed that men possessed their own arms and ammunition, to be leveraged for use in the trained bands. Additionally, provisions for those who could not afford their weapons and equipment came from the town council or local committee of safety. In a contemporary setting, heavy equipment and complex weapon systems could also be provided through association dues as well as external patronage from corporations, foundations, and civic organizations. One objection might be that most people in a modern society are too busy to take time out for militia service. They lack the aptitude or prefer to spend their time doing other things. Going back to the days of colonial militia is incompatible with contemporary life, one could argue. While having security skills inculcated throughout a community is likely to reduce property violations, people's security needs are highly heterogeneous, as Hans Hermann Hoppe has pointed out, and as such, the way that they assume risk will determine the type and level of protection they contract for. It also implies that service providers will cater to various client needs in different ways, leading to a highly diverse security industry with a patchwork structure based on the diverse properties their clients wish to cover. This means that jurisdictions will frequently adjust according to market demands and each security provider's subscriber base. Some protective affiliations will be little more than a mutual defense association, such as a local militia, where the members have high participation requirements. Other associations may bundle patrol services, dispute mediation, and restitution for losses in the manner of a comprehensive insurance policy. Some associations may be regionally based, while others may provide coverage in specific niches, such as cyberspace. Bruce Benson, in his 2011 Enterprise of Law, posits the likely vertical integration of services that operate like a cooperative surety group, with market forces dictating the actual industrial organization. Since large firms have more property to insure and protect, Robert Murphy, in his 2002 Chaos Theory, predicts the bulk of the revenue for the surety industry would be borne by companies operating apartment complexes, shopping malls, manufacturing plants, banks, and skyscrapers. Additionally, schools, restaurants, and hotels that package security into their value proposition are more attractive to consumers, and in a competitive marketplace, businesses have strong incentives to continually improve their offerings in the way Ed Stringham describes in his 2015 book on private governance. Firms and individuals in such an environment would be strongly induced to hold adequate surety coverage, leading to a global competitive enterprise striving to minimize aggression, with damage claims settled through mutually defined arbitration procedures. So, improving the function of law means securing the property interests of people from all unwanted incursions and arranging compensation for any violations. Defensive alliances are a natural outcome of a society enjoying the benefits of economic integration, and it is reasonable to expect specialized firms to provide security, dispute mediation, and indemnification services. However, upholding law as just conduct in human relations precludes the emergence of any monopoly provider able to impose the terms of service upon its constituents. Continually asserting choice in the selection of protective affiliations creates a competitive atmosphere of ever-improving security services that cater to the particular needs of a diverse population. So friends, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of Everyday Samurai and look forward to seeing you next time. Be sure to subscribe to our feed so as to stay up to date with our latest offerings. If you like what you've heard here, give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review. Share it with a friend or someone you think that would benefit from this message. Remember to stop by shop.everydaysamurai.life for your everyday carry needs. Pick up a tactical pen and get our Tactical Pen Basics Guide as a bonus. That's shop.everydaysamurai.life. Until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and be well.